Hey, everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. I'm looking forward to talking to AJ Lawrence. AJ, thanks for chiming in all the way from Spain. What time is it right now in Spain?
It's not that late. It's 2 p.m.
So okay, good.
Yeah,
all right,
6 hours ahead of the East Coast.
All right. So, hey, I'm looking forward to talking with you. You've got a phenomenal podcast, Beyond Eight Figures, which can be found on the podcast platforms and beyond the number 8figures.com. And, I thought we could talk a little bit about today, as we're sitting here kind of Q2 2022, I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to grow when we're almost kind of potentially looking at a recession in front of us. I mean, inflation and interest rates on the rise and supply chain issues and war, and my heart goes out to everyone in the Ukraine. I think it takes more work today to maybe make the same thing you were making a year or two ago. And I think everybody's kind of wanting to get to, beyond 8 figures if they can. and so let's just kind of rewind for a minute and talk about mindset, right? Because we can hear all of this and it can really get us into a bad place. But I think getting back to center and having the right mindset of moving forward, it always begins there. So talk a little bit about the mindset of someone who's even on the journey of getting to beyond 8 figures.
Yeah, I mean, it is really fascinating because I'm a repeat entrepreneur. I've sold 3 businesses in the low to mid 7 figures. So I have a very small violin to play to complain here, but I've never, in my sense, in the concept of entrepreneurism, I haven't been successful. And because the whole motif of an entrepreneur is, building rocket ships and, going off to Mars and all that. When in reality, we all have our own individual journeys that we have to define as success.
Right.
In having the podcast, I've been fascinated by talking with successful entrepreneurs because they seem to not at first, and they all have that what I call that early stage where they're just trying to get the business moving. But there's something going in what drives them forward. And as they grow the business, they use that mission, that intention, there's all different types of terminology, but they lean into it. And that I find so fascinating, that mindset of we're doing this for a bigger reason. Yeah. Yes, you can be successful for just money and all this. But in the entrepreneurs I've been able to talk to, I really found wow, it's almost a cheat code. Not just saying you have a mission, just oh yeah, we're going to help the planet, but actually putting the effort and the time to make sure your business model and your efforts and your employees and your customers and everything you're doing align with what this mission is.
Yeah.
It's work, it's hard work. But it does seem, consistently to show an extra boost on just running your business as quickly as you can.
Yeah. Let's talk about something. Let's dive into something you said. I talk a lot as a business coach. I talk a lot about finding your driver, finding the people that you lead, knowing their drivers. What's the common driver behind the mission of a lot of the people that you're talking to?
It's funny. I thought it would be I bought the podcast and it was very much about the tech bro and the excitement about how much money people were making on the podcast. It was a great podcast. We're diving more into trying to get an understanding of a broader sense of entrepreneurism. Really what I've seen consistently is this desire to create the world that they want to see. This is it's, yes, there are people who tactically, oh, I can make money doing X, Y, and Z. But repeatedly again and again, it's people seeing, this doesn't exist. And I would like this to exist. Now, you see that a lot in, entrepreneurs and startup, but once again, getting deliberate about that focus and moving beyond. There's that transition point where leaning into servicing that seems to drive a lot of entrepreneurs further.
Let's talk about being deliberate because, behind being deliberate is being tenaciously consistent, right? And
Yes.
not giving up, and constantly evolving, and constantly not changing your mission, but as you consistently accelerate the business, you uncover more things, and you shape shift a little bit, and then you have to pivot, like we saw, people pivoting and when COVID and the lockdown hit. Excuse me. And so talk about the consistency in the beginning, that consistency and the tenacity of just not giving up. You hit a wall, you figure out how to go through it. You get through it, you hit another wall, right? And then just talk a little bit about the energy of that.
That's, this is what's so fascinating about, so many entrepreneurs. That is the secret to their early success. I called it, I could throw things. I'm this really big ex-football player. I'm 6'4" and, big guy. So I didn't call it smashing through walls. I said I would throw things on my shoulder and run forward with it. It's that concept repeatedly I hear from entrepreneurs. It's like, I can make it, that hustle culture, etc. But something happens, upper six figures, depending on your business model, low seven figures, etc., where complexity starts increasing.
Yeah.
And this focus on move that helped you so much early on actually starts hurting, because you have more things and you have the same amount of time, as I well know, having blown some companies up in this space. Yeah. That's where I like deliberate, because deliberate is, yes, push, work, but it's being intelligent about what you're doing. And it is that the focus on incremental. It is, look, I don't know what's going to be success. I don't know what's going to cause, me to make $10 million, but I do know, of all the things in front of me, these things, if I focus on them, are probably going to get me a little further. And that's the idea of constantly taking that energy to break through walls, but trying to develop models, processes, structure around what's going to be the most effective wall to break through, instead of all of them. Because
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. You've mentioned that you've started and sold 3 companies.
Yeah.
What's, somebody who's looking to sell a company today, what's in the market that we're in today, what's different? I sold my first company when I was 25. I started an internet company when I was 23. The market was consolidating, and we sold our company when I was 25. You couldn't do that. You couldn't do that today, right? There was an element of timing, as well as, everything, hard work. But what's kind of the formula for the next couple of years to sell a company?
This is what I find fascinating, because, I'm on the other side. I am looking to go buy companies. I'm going back into the market, and the space has so blown up. Yes, there are the traditional, the idea is typical looking of size, $500,000 plus in free cash flow, X. But I'm seeing people making good living selling $10,000 sites that they, started for 100.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are structures. You can go look at, Mac Lackey's, there are tons of people who, talk to that, what I call that, like a couple million to mid upper 7 figures and then higher, preparing your company, the build to sell model, getting all that together. There are some great things there, but I'm seeing people who are making amazing living, building these micro productized, productized services and flipping them soon as they get traction, again and again and again. So depending on how you're looking to sell, you just got to find which niche is going to give you that best outcome.
It's interesting. You're talking about niche, and I was at your website again, beyond the number 8figures.com. And on it, you have that you interviewed Kara Golden, who's the CEO and founder of Hint. And so when you're talking about niche, so I interviewed Kara on my podcast. I was on her podcast. She's an incredible human being. She's a phenomenal CEO.
Yeah.
And you talk about a niche, right? So she took the water market, the water industry, and most people would look at that industry and say, there's no way that I can kind of find my niche in it. Yet she, like you said earlier, they see something that doesn't exist and they want it. Well, one of the things she wanted was she didn't like she didn't like water, so she wanted to make it enjoyable. So she put kind of a hint flavor of all these different flavors. Her product is phenomenal. It's so good. My whole family loves it. And so she really had the courage to do exactly what you're saying and then jump into an industry where I think most people would have been terrified to even begin. And so talk a little bit about that courage. I loved listening to her courage, how she just really plowed through, to make it happen.
I like how you say courage, because I hadn't really thought of that, because I am fascinated with Kara, because Kara, as a marketing agency person, you give me a series of numbers, and an ex-auditor going back and chemistry degree, I can reverse engineer anything. And data is how I think. Give me numbers and it's all nice and good in the world. Kara was, force of will, but courage is probably a better thing. It makes no sense. There were waters out there. There were flavored waters, the 50 cents or whatever, all those other companies. She used her courage to be herself.
Yeah.
Her passion in that as the driver, for that. And that was what's so interesting, because if you go and look at her different steps, it was about her journey. And then it was about the journey of the people who joined her earlier. First her, then those early adopters, and then this big movement. I don't know if I could do that. So I find it, her ability to lean into what was important to her. That's where I try and tell entrepreneurs, that's the thing to kind of look at. It didn't happen overnight. She wasn't Kara, or she was, hey, I've been in business and I've seen some really good people doing business in the past. She had worked for some, Steve Case at AOL and other things. But like she said, she just did what she believed in and stuck to it.
Yeah. She stuck to it.
Yeah,
she's great. Well, I'm going to encourage everybody I haven't listened to the interview you did with her, but I'm going to encourage everybody to listen to it, and the one that I did with her, because she really is, if you want to be encouraged, I'll link to her episode. I'll link to her episode of your podcast and my episode in the show notes of your show. So you can send me that link so I can do that.
Yeah, I will. I'll make sure.
So you talked about something, you used the word early adopters earlier. And when I hear that word, I always think of the book, and maybe you read it, maybe you got it from that, maybe you didn't, Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. And that's the first time when I read that book 25 years ago, or maybe longer, where, he shows kind of the bell curve of the early adopters and the laggards. And I still think I talk about that book a lot, because I think that book is very relevant today, as relevant as it was when I read it, some time ago. Well, talk a little bit about, early adopters, what makes an early adopter, because I think that's where the entrepreneur really sits, right? That's where the creativity of the idea sits, in that early adopter.
It's funny because, I'm a little bit, just generally from looking at your background and stuff, I'm a little bit older than you, but not by much.
How old are you?
I am 54.
All right. So I'll be 50 in May.
Well, hey,
there you go.
Congratulations. That's a good one.
Thank you.
So, I remember that book, and it was funny. And I think, you reading in 95, it resonated because a lot of us, we saw the internet as being this thing. And yet it was like, I still remember, that computer stuff, even into the late 90s and 2000s. I think, the challenge of an entrepreneur is, yes, we are the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. We are the translators of the untranslatable. We have to go out, but we have to not fall in, it's too easy sometimes to go too far, because, I've sold 3 businesses, but I've started about 12. A lot of times, way too early, or, way wrong. So it's like the the balancing point for an entrepreneur is to see that there is an opportunity and then convince, what's that great video of like the one man dancing at the
Oh
big,
yeah, it's great. Right.
and then it's the
a couple
second
people.
person.
Right. Yeah.
It's that second person that then people started looking at, and then you had 3,
Right.
4, 5. It's like your job is to find that curve, that early opportunity, and find the few things. I call it trench warfare. Do the hard things, the things that don't scale, whatever. There's much more intelligent people than me talking about that space. But that's our role, to find why it's important to other people once we think it's important to us.
Yeah. Because you can have an idea, but if it's not important and people won't pay for it, then, unless you want to start a nonprofit, it's not a business. Let's talk about because you interview entrepreneurs. And so I want to dive into the person who's listening to this, because I think there's different types of entrepreneurs, right? There's the person who has a full-time job, who's an entrepreneur on the side, doing an Amazon store or an Etsy store, or, things of that nature. There's the entrepreneur who has a business partner or multiple business partners, because they know that they maybe don't consider themselves an entrepreneur, but with business partners, they can be an entrepreneur. And then there's entrepreneur, that can start their own business. And then there's the entrepreneur who starts the Fortune, 500 business. And so just talk a little bit about, how the entrepreneur today kind of steps more deeply into their entrepreneurial spirit.
Well, it's fascinating because, there are more people starting businesses or doing, entrepreneurial efforts than ever before. Now, what's nice is, compared to, 20 plus years ago, there's less and less of the noise of what is an entrepreneur and then what isn't. Like, oh, you have a service business. Yeah, it's not now it's, something. I think, the idea is it's stepping into what it means to be an entrepreneur. Now, I call it the entrepreneurial journey. I've heard you talk about the journey people take on doing their businesses. I've been fascinated by the people who look at their own efforts as an entrepreneur separate from their efforts with the business.
Mm-hmm.
The business is their main tool. It's their means of expression of their entrepreneurial efforts, but it's not their journey. It is just one part of it. And that I find really fascinating, because behind a lot of these really successful entrepreneurs are long periods of time where they did other things that maybe were successful, but smaller or different, or, and they build upon their capabilities, it's not it's that ability to practice being an entrepreneur. The only way to do it is to actually do it, but you do get better. So I get fascinated by that.
Good. I love it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about you. Go back. So you said you're 54. Go back, 30, 40 plus years. Who were the entrepreneurs that early on influenced you?
It's really funny because I started playing around with computers. All right, I am one of those horrible MBAs, and I jokingly say I'm only an MBA because I had an economics professor from my undergrad years who thought it'd be really funny if I applied for a fellowship that no one had ever applied for. Mm-hmm. This is pre all scholarships and everything being online. I was talking that I had no idea what I was doing. I was preparing for the State Department test and thinking about med school. And this economics professor was like, oh, there's an accounting fellowship that no one's ever applied for at the business school at the university I went to. So I got into business pretty much for 2 extra years of not growing up at first.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had been playing on early ARPANET, then internet,
web,
and BBC is great. BBSs. I had been setting up BBSs for folk. And I just thought that was something to the side and I had to grow up. Um, my first business I started was so I could continue playing with computers.
Yeah.
Literally, it was just that. It was not anything formal. And the business people I knew were business people. I knew
Yeah.
small business people, but I didn't know entrepreneurs who would just create things out of nothing.
Yeah.
That really didn't happen, and to my own detriment, to literally my late 20s, early 30s, where all of a sudden it was like, oh, these people exist. The
Yeah.
first internet wave,
Yeah.
all that. In the early 90s, I knew people who had their own businesses and I knew people who ran companies. I didn't really know entrepreneurs who started things from scratch.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So you had the courage to kind of jump in too.
I don't know if it was courage. I couldn't work. I have this joke. I've worked, from when I did work for other people. The longest I ever worked for a company was 1 year and 2 days.
Yeah.
I just am horrible working for other people.
All right. So. Good. I get it. All right, AJ, quick speed round. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Favorite book and why?
Love and the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Marcia. I'm going to massacre his name. Why am I doing that? Gabriel Garcia Marquez. First time I was late teenager years. Thought I knew what love was. And reading that was the first time I actually felt I understood what love was.
Nice.
By reading that. It was beautiful. And I was backpacking through Ecuador. So it was perfect place.
Nice. All right, good. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
And I didn't even take the most interesting job, not the most high paying. And I completely ignored it for 10 years. So yeah.
All right, good. Finish this sentence, AJ. The number one thing that every entrepreneur should do day one is
understand why they're doing it.
Amen. All right, AJ, tell people where they can connect with you, learn about your podcast, and connect with you.
Yeah. Go check out beyond8figures.com, sign up for our newsletter. We have great entrepreneurs every week coming on the show. We try and break down what they're sharing with everyone so you can take it into your life, into your businesses. Also check out, me on Twitter, AJ Lawrence, at AJ Lawrence, or find me on LinkedIn, AJ Lawrence.
All right. AJ, I appreciate you being on the show today. Think community. Yeah, think community. Being an entrepreneur isn't necessarily easy, but it can be so fulfilling if it's the right path for you. I'm a big believer that, we all should be doing something that is fulfilling and in alignment with us. And not everybody's an entrepreneur. And sometimes, just, doing something on the side, can be entrepreneurial. So, it doesn't have to fit in the perfect box. And I think we're in a world today where people have a lot of ideas, a lot of creativity, and the technology to be an entrepreneur, even if it's 5 or 10% of your career. So, you can be a part-time entrepreneur, a part-time or a full-time entrepreneur. So, I'm going to encourage everybody, to me, the theme of what we talked a lot about today was courage. I'm going to encourage everybody to really tap into your courage and just, do something. If you see something, I'm going to say what you said, AJ, if you see something that doesn't exist and you want it and there's a need for it and people want it and will pay for it, jump in. AJ, thanks so much. Think community. Thanks so much for your time. Have an amazing day, everybody. Thanks, AJ.
Bye, John.